Welcome to Why I Left, a podcast that explores the Great Resignation. I'm your host, Brian Aquart. Join me as I chronicle real stories from real people about the reasons they decided to leave their jobs during the pandemic and what has happened since. Hello, and thanks for tuning into this episode of the Why I Left podcast. In today's episode, I chat with Maura Barclay. Maura is an unapologetic champion for diverse voices in leadership, a culture consultant, and host of the Sea Change podcast. Her show explores how homogenized leadership teams left themselves vulnerable to risks that could only be seen from different points of view and different lived experiences. I'm excited for her to share a little bit about her show and her practice, so let's go check it out. All right, welcome back. So our guest today is Maura Barclay. Maura is the CEO and founder of Changing Greatly, a culture and talent consultancy that helps organizations create psychologically safe and inclusive cultures that unleash a love for work. She is a certified change management professional, a certified talent optimization leader with Predictive Index, and a neurofacilitation practitioner. She's had the privilege of bringing her thought leadership to Fortune 500 companies, the U.S. military, and even the International Monetary Fund, among others. Now, although she didn't join the Great Resignation herself, I wanted to hear her perspective on this trend's impact on company culture and what she's seeing in her practice. So hi, Maura. How you doing today? Thanks for joining me.
Thanks, Brian. It's such a pleasure to be here. I love what you're doing with this show. We talked about earlier, like this is some evergreen stuff, and it's particularly relevant now, but it will always be. So I'm very honored to have the opportunity to have this conversation with you today.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate that. And now, so before we get into some of the work that you're doing, which I think is just amazing, and I've had a chance to learn a little bit more about it, but tell us more about your background and your upbringing.
Okay. Well, I don't want to go too far back because we only have the time we have. I was born in Michigan. Actually, that's true. I'm from Michigan. And that's something I think we talked about. We did the old mitten thing, right?
Yes, so we did.
Good Midwestern girl, salt of the earth, that is the Midwestern way. And I wound up, I had that's a euphemism. I had quite a chaotic childhood. So my first job out of college, I got a degree at the School of Journalism and Mass Communication at University of Boulder. I was really attracted to service. And I wanted to do something that made a manifest difference in people's lives, like not theory. I wanted manifest. I wanted like tangible. So I decided I wanted to be a firefighter, and it took me, I think, 3 years as a professional candidate to become a firefighter. And I was really determined not to be an affirmative action hire. That was really important to me. And although people cannot tell, I am a 5'0" female. It was very difficult because just getting a ladder off a truck, those ladders are 72 inches, that's 6 feet, folks. It's very difficult for me to do it. So I had to get very creative and have a lot of tools and webbing, and I had to strategize every single thing to protect my body and be able to do the job. So I worked out like a fiend. I was a bodybuilder at the time, and it was really important to me to be able to show up and do that job. So I was a minority, and I got to experience what it's like to be the other in a culture. And I was also really determined to not be that woman, right? Like, all the women were complaining and, and stuff like that. I'm like, it's fine with me, guys. Like, I'm fine. And what a mistake that was, because I was completely code switching. I was completely denying my own culture in order to fit in. And as a Jewish American princess. Now, there aren't a lot of female Jews on the fire department. I might have been the only one to my knowledge at the time. So I just didn't feel comfortable bringing my culture there at all. And there was one time where I did, and I just felt the tension. They wanted to change the uniforms to dark blue from light blue. And of course, everyone's like, we look like a garbage man. Let's, get the navy blue. And they were demoing it, and the battalion chief came down the stairs, and he was wearing this dark blue uniform. And I thought it looked fantastic. And I looked at him like, oh my God, what a great top. It came out of my mouth before I could stop it. And all the men just kind of looked at me and were like, it's a uniform shirt. I'm like, yeah, whoops a daisy. Wouldn't want any of that female culture to get on you. Have to take a shower, wash it off. So it wound up not going well. I had, because of my resistance to being a squeaky wheel, I got stationed with a really, really awful, abusive lieutenant. And he wound up harassing me. And I actually used the harassment protection offered by human resources. And the entire union turned on me. Like, you're not supposed to use those. You're not supposed to make a stink. You're supposed to take it and suffer like the rest of us. I'm like, y'all are crazy. Like, what? I did not belong there. I was not a culture fit at all. So I wound up doing some other things, and I went through the mind-body career. I was a teacher trainer for a really powerful, effective modality called yoga tune-up. It's therapeutic yoga. So I got into mind, body, spirit. I got into consciousness and helping people be more conscious, increase their self-awareness. This is really important to me. This is how I was being of service. And I went through a variety of different careers, and none of them really fit. I didn't really love them all. And I eventually got to consulting, and I started off in the women's empowerment space. I wrote a book called Compassionate Self-Defense and Empowerment. And my company was called Unbreakable Woman. And this is some of the work I did for those Fortune 500 companies and for the US militaries. Advanced situational awareness, how to lead as a woman, how to be in your personal authority without giving into being a quote unquote bitch, right? Like, you don't need to do that. That's not how we roll as women typically. And trying to help women find their voice in leadership and how to negotiate, how to navigate bias when they see it. So this was all very new. Like, nobody really wanted to talk about this stuff. And I got I got invited to some really cool companies to have this conversation. And I recognized, you know what, getting women, this is called hardening the target, getting women to do a better job at defending themselves is not going to prevent violence or harassment or bias. What we need to do is invite men into the conversation, because all the behavior is coming from men. And by the way, it's coming from a minority of men. I want to make that really clear. In fact, in my book, within the first 2 pages, it's like, there'll be no man bashing here. Men are part of the solution in as much as they're part of the problem. There's lots of men who are like, hey, what's with the bias? What's with the chauvinism? Like, knock it off. Aren't we over that? A lot of really men who are really dedicated and committed to being allies. So I just want to be super clear about that. No man bashing for me, no shame, no blame. And I was trying to figure out, like, Brian, what possible work could I do that helps invite men into this conversation of generational legacy? Forget about trying to make the most money for the company. Someone can always come in and do a bigger, better job of that. But who is bringing diverse voices to their leadership teams and increasing their revenue that way? That is a generational legacy. That is a culture change. And I thought, oh, it's culture. That's what it is. So I can help women find their own unique culture their way of being leaders through my women's empowerment work, and then invite men, because I spent so much time in male-dominated fields. Like, I feel like I totally get bro culture. I've been in it. I'm a younger sister. My brother's a total bro. I don't know. I just kind of grew up in it, and I'm comfortable with it, and I don't blame them for it. But I'm like, let's work together a little bit better. You just need to be open to working together. And oh, by the way, you're going to see it on your P&L at the end of the year. So let's do this, right? That's how I got into what I'm doing. And it is, you work in a similar space, just from kind of a different vector.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what I'm all about. And that's what the Sea Change podcast is about, is interviewing predominantly rich white guys who have figured out how to have to make their businesses thrive, like long-term thriving with people of color and women in positions of power. Yeah. They've done it. So I'm like, let the white men teach the white men. They don't want to hear it from me.
Right.
Let the white guys teach the white guys. Here's how it's done, guys. Listen or don't. But eventually your board will pressure you to bring some different points of view into your executive team, because the businesses that are doing it are going to edge you out. Yeah. It's just the math. It's just math.
Yeah. And then, so you talked a little bit about how you got into this culture consulting space. Tell us a little bit about Changing Greatly, and kind of a little bit more about the type of work that you all do. Because it's more than culture-based, I understand.
Oh, 100%. So, at the end of the day, I've been called to service, starting with the fire department, and now more like I want to be able to reach more people. And when I started Unbreakable Woman, I was MCBC consulting, and it was about trying to help, hundreds or thousands of women, if I could, be able to thrive in roles of leadership, be able to feel more powerful and avoid issues. Now, it became changing greatly when I recognized an opportunity for, like, I wouldn't say transformation, because that's a bigger leap. Let's just start with small incremental changes, because I feel like those can happen. I have a private consultancy. I work with leaders that one-on-one, I do coaching with them. And I've taken what I've learned in the micro with these folks and seeing how incremental change works, and how when they up level, then what to do from there and all these things. And I have operationalized that and scaled it for the macro. And one of the ways into this very powerful and potent change is through talent. Strategic objectives get executed through people. You're not going to get anything done without your people. And if you love your people and they love the company, then they will love your customers. They will love the work that they do, but it starts with leadership. So I have a little saying, come for the talent, stay for the culture. There's no point in winning the war on talent if your toxic work culture squeezes them out the back end in 6 to 18 months. What a waste of money. Like, you're leaving so much money on the table with that. Like, it just makes economic sense to make some changes. Like, I don't care why you change. Let me help you. This is operational. This is strategy. And if it has a lasting outcome, awesome. This is a strategic conversation that I want to have with companies, that I'm having with companies, and starting with bringing data-driven processes like predictive index to hiring, what I call precision hiring. So you have data to actually inform the decisions you're making to increase the likelihood that the right people are going to be in the right roles. And then the talent piece comes in to make sure that they thrive.
Right. No, that's great. And now, prior to COVID, what was volume like in your business, and in what areas did you find your business being needed most?
I worked almost exclusively privately. I had because the stress, the people came out of the woodwork. And I am not a inexpensive coach. The only reason I'm saying this is because even when people were not working, they valued their well-being and their personal evolution so much that they hired me during COVID. And some of them stopped working and they hired me anyway. So I saw a lot of private. I was sold out. I couldn't take any other work because I was working exclusively with these leaders. And what I was hearing was a lot of, how do I work within the culture that we have? And now it's remote. How do we, I don't quite know what to do. It's got, if there's any machinations or politics, it's very difficult to suss out when you're exclusively remote. So there was a lot of strategy and working on people's resiliency and reducing reactivity, and really became about nurturing their nervous system so that they could maintain their well-being and still work through the pandemic.
Yeah, no, that's huge. And now, when you decided to start this company, what was like the first step that you took?
I think the very first thing I did was recognize that I wanted to do something bigger, and I hired a very powerful branding agency. When I say powerful, I mean about the work that they do. It's called Branding for the People. It's owned by a gentleman by the name of Ree Perez. And he and his team helped me build the vision of the company that I wanted to build. And I was able to attract a really robust group of advisors. So no matter what the issue is, my bench is very deep. The people that have agreed to show up when I need them, they have been in business a long time and have had a long track record of success, way longer than mine. I'm like, I don't know what the heck I'm doing. I'm quote unquote new to this. I mean, I'm not really. I've done bits and pieces of this over the years. I've just never put it all together in one single package. And I'm like, I don't have all the answers. I'm good at this thing. So I want to make sure I have people around me who can help me do all the other stuff, because they're already doing it in Fortune 500 companies primarily.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So now I want to take you back, right? So let's go back to March of 2020, right? And we're all introduced to COVID. And, nowadays things are kind of dying down from a COVID standpoint, although we do have maybe a little monkeypox, going on here. But I want you to talk a little bit about how the pandemic affected you.
Well, me personally, I have what I call the Ferris Bueller mindset. I never worried about it. It was never an issue for me. I also have a background in pre-hospital care and medicine, right? So I had cancer in 2016. So I have been through it. I know all about it. I know about having very dangerous illnesses and feeling like your mortality is at hand. And all of that just gave me a perspective of like, I just be careful. There was so much, it was so different than anything I had ever seen. I was a little surprised, like, why is this so different than a regular flu? I mean, I understand why it was, but I guess I was a little flummoxed by the whole thing. Like, I think what I saw from my perspective, there was a lot of really good that came out of it. There was a lot of tragedy that came out of it too. So I don't want to be cavalier or diminish the pain, suffering, and we would say the discord, the hardship that this pandemic, I'm not glossing over that. I want to acknowledge that and also speak from my point of view, where there's a lot of golden light around this. Number one, it changed our entire culture and people started caring about their health as a global community. And I watched that happen. And I was very uplifted by seeing how quickly the earth healed, recovered from human pollution, and how people worked together, how they helped each other. It reminded me very much of when 9/11 happened and you saw a side of New Yorkers you rarely see. They were looking out for each other. They were taking care of each other. They were their brothers and they were family for like a month. That's all you're going to get out of New Yorkers. But I felt that happened on a global scale. And I just thought, oh my God, I don't think we're going to be able to come back. I don't think we're coming back from this. I think it's only forward from here. People had to become more self-aware. I always tell people, don't touch your face. Don't touch your eyes. Whatever's on your hands, you're inoculating into your body. And I see people unconsciously touching themselves. Suddenly people became very conscious of what they were doing. You can't sell a more effective self-awareness program than a pandemic. I was shocked at how self-aware and open people were to each other. Obviously, there's other things that came about that weren't so great, and it got politicized. And I had people, snapping at me on the sidewalk, "Where's your mask?" And I felt like that was not the time to get into a parts per million conversation and wind vectors and like, if we're going to be okay if we're outside and we're distanced. But, I'm like, that wasn't my monkey. That was their monkey. Right. So there were interactions like that. I'm like, if I will get you 10, she's got parents that are probably at risk and she doesn't want me to rake her. So they just blah, blah, blah. Right. So I saw all of that, but it just, it created this new way of being as a species that got me very excited. And it also created a work from home demand that should have been part of our knowledge economy from the moment Apple opened its doors. Remote work is knowledge economy fodder. And it took a global pandemic to start to loosen the command and control grip, which came from the Industrial Revolution. We have the most antiquated work scenario that you can imagine, and it's absolutely unnecessary for everybody. There are some people that love to be at work, and there's some people who love to do their work on their own terms. I'm one of those people. Although I want to be, when I'm training people, I want us to all to be together if we can. But if we can't, we can't. So that was one of the major gifts of the pandemic. And we're watching that unfold, and companies are trying like hell to get their command and control back. And let me tell you, it's not going well.
Right. I've seen it. I've definitely seen it.
You know exactly what I'm talking about. It's like, all right, people, are you ready to stop with the nonsense? Because You are not listening. What do we do? What do we do? Like, engagement? I'm like, just listen.
Right.
Just listen to what they're saying.
Right.
Oh, we want to engage our people as long as they're engaged on our terms.
Right.
No, that's not how it works. You want autonomous people who feel like you trust them to do their work. That's engagement. Paradigm shift, please.
Yeah, definitely. And now, how did the pandemic really start to affect your clients and your business as a whole?
Well, culture, I'll tell you what, I feel like I've been dressed as Santa Claus and it's finally Christmas. I mean, culture has become, I've been dressed as Santa Claus for a long time, Brian. Culture has become a competitive advantage. And now we have some unassailable metrics around that. McKinsey's measuring it, Deloitte, OC Tanner, all these companies are measuring how critical culture is to all of the other metrics that influence productivity and revenue. And it's sort of this ephemeral, but not ephemeral, but it's sort of like this esoteric idea, like, well, what is culture? And it's sort of tricky because people have a hard time, especially task-oriented, strategic people. Sometimes they have a hard time figuring out, well, if you can't measure culture, so we're not sure exactly how to implement or operationalize it. And it's not culture. This is the thing about it, is you can't hold culture. Like, you can't hold the wind, but you sure as heck know when it's blowing. Right. Okay? Get a windsock. Use a pulse survey. That will tell you everything you need to know about your culture. Do you have a psychologically safe space? What's your attrition? These are the symptoms of culture. So what we do is we tend to like play whack-a-mole, and the pandemic has exposed the necessity for a cohesive culture strategy for people. I feel that became so clear because, what was it? I think it was in March of this year, 4.4 million people left their jobs.
Yep.
The number one reason was toxic work culture. Right. Now, and that is because of the pandemic, because people got a taste. I mean, listen, marriages broke up. People like me, like, oh my God, when my marriage didn't break up, I was already divorced. But I had to, remote learning with my kid and then trying to do work. What? It was crazy. Yeah. That year was it was just a dumpster fire for education. So what it did was show us, all right, we are completely capable of this. And the companies that get it will create cultures, unspoken rules about how things are done and what's important. That's what culture is. Companies that have a culture that value team first, a team first culture. Now, like that even what was kind of a thing, but now it's a competitive advantage. Now it's going to win the war on talent. We didn't have a war on talent. We didn't have the great resignation. That's all because of COVID. So that opens up opportunities for practitioners like myself coming with talent and culture strategies and solutions to help companies just pivot a little bit, just a little bit. And or they might have to go to the flotilla. Okay, we're going to have to break apart this huge ship and it's time for the flotilla. That's going to be we're going to need a whole football team of culture consultants for that. We need everybody for that one. That's a big deal.
Yeah, no, definitely. And that's actually one of a nice segue. We're talking about culture. Obviously this show is about the Great Resignation. So what have you seen are some of the biggest impacts that of the Great Resignation on organizational culture?
Yeah, it is creating an openness to change through absolute economic necessity that was not there before. It has created what I'm calling, or I don't think if I'm calling it, I haven't heard it before, but I'm sure I'm just tapping into like the group mind. There is a silent revolution going on, maybe not so silent. It's like somehow job seekers have unionized and they will ghost you if you don't have a culture. In fact, 78% of job seekers won't even look at a position unless the company culture aligns with their core values. They care more about it than money. That is new because COVID shifted our priorities as a people. And people who are at the top of the food chain, they have the luxury of being the deciders. People who are not at the top of that hierarchy are like, my well-being suddenly became more important than your money, but you can't do your job without me. I've got some power. Holy cow. When did that happen? Right? Thanks, COVID. So that happened. And that is what I'm seeing. And when, I've been on, every time I get a Twitter notification, and it's shocking to me, some of the practices that are still alive and well. This one woman, she's got like a couple of degrees from the best schools in the nation for engineering. And she was made to go through 15 separate interviews. 15. I was like, what? I actually posted about this on LinkedIn. I took a screenshot of her post, and people were piling on going like, yep, 9, 10, 11. Like, this is still a practice. I'm like, I don't think you people understand why would, like, 3 and done, if you can't get it done, and the majority of it in 3, I don't know please hire me. I'll help you. That tells me that you are so accustomed to playing darts with your eyes closed. You're like, we need 15 attempts to try to get a bullseye. Well, of course, if you're not using data for your decisions. That's why predictive index is so powerful a tool. And here's the thing, Brian, it takes care of hiring managers and recruiters, and it takes care of the employee, and everybody wins. Can we all just do stuff that works for both people? Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And now that's a perfect segue into this area. And now we've mentioned it a couple of times, this thing called predictive index, right? And I've been fortunate enough to kind of take my own assessment, and wow, I was blown away. And so now you've recently started kind of working with this product. Now tell us more about predictive index and how and where it's used.
I will. I feel like I want to ask you a question though.
Oh, sure.
This will help people understand. Will you please tell your community why it blew you away?
Oh, absolutely. So when I took the predictive index, I guess, model or assessment a few weeks ago, it found that I was a promoter, right? And so one of the things that was interesting about it, I mean, it was kind of, me to a T, if you will. And so that was interesting, but really where it started to go, like really start blowing my mind, was you can take how the type of style that I have as a leader, potentially as a manager, and then put that into this model. And let's say I could come in there and let's say, Maura, you reported to me. You could then now put your assessment in there, and then it showed us how we worked together, where we would have some really great conversations, where there may be, I think what it was called, and keep me honest, but it was like cautions, if you will, right? But the cautions, at least, areas, potential cautionary areas. And one of the things that was funny, I guess, for our caution was that, basically, and I'm, paraphrasing here, but that Brian and Maura would be so enthralled in the conversations with one another that they wouldn't take any notes or any details about what was going on. And it was to the T, it was really to the T. And so that was cool. And then you take it a step further with, and this, look, you're the expert on this one, but I was taken aback with, you could create a JD, you put it in the model, you then run, I guess, let's say you have an organization of 100 people who have all taken the predictive index, assessment. And based on this JD, let's just use, assistant director or director of finance or something like that. Based on what you've put in the JD and the requirements that you've mentioned, then it is able to just blindly say, well, hey, here are the folks currently who map to what you said the JD is going to look like. And here's where, no, they're right within this area, or someone's outside of the, I guess, the band, if you will, the target. Yeah. And then it was like, and then the step further was, okay, well, they should be interviewed. And here are the questions that you should be asking them if they're outside of the target. And look, I do training on structured interviewing and unconscious bias. Like that's a part of my wheelhouse. And then to see the questions, I was just like, how come more people aren't using this? So I'm intrigued. And I know I asked you the question, but I mean, hopefully I did it justice by giving the explanation here, but I was blown away. I haven't seen anything like that. And I've done a ton of assessments, but none that took it this far.
Yeah, that's the thing that got me excited about it. I mean, I'm a nerd anyway. Like, I'm an anatomy nerd. I love science and data, and I also love spirituality and like the intersection. You know, I think they're saying like mysticism is the new language of science, as Dr. Joe Dispenza says, because there's so much interplay of like, oh wow, we actually don't know. We don't really know anything. And the thing that I loved about this, to your point, is, and I hope we don't put you out of a job there. You'll have other things you can teach. You know, we could, you can put your structured interview stuff on the back burner. Let us do that for you. You've got other skills and gifts and talents that we can't capture with the predictive index software. So the thing that's also super cool that we didn't really talk about is when you're talking about doing an internal move, right? And you put that JD in there. Let's say that you want I heard this broken down the other day, and I just have to share this with you. If you have like a technical sales position, and within your organization, you really would need to fill it fast. You've got all of these sort of social salesy people, but there's a technical piece that nobody has. But if you then put the technical piece, if you do another JD for just the technical piece, now suddenly you've got all these other people. You can actually bring like a quant and a salesperson in and fulfill the role within your organization, and you allow them to, do you feel what I'm saying? You allow them to work together. You're giving them a little bit of stretch. It's so cool. Like who thinks of these things? Like it's not necessarily new, but it's never their business model is like they partner with consultants like me, and it is completely organic. It's organic. And you can take all the data you're getting from the giants, Deloitte, McKinsey, OC10, all these people that I've mentioned, and you can apply some of that stuff. But the people profile business, the granularity of understanding what drives people, I keep being astonished by it. I keep waiting for that person who's like, oh no, this is nothing like me. That hasn't happened yet. I'm waiting for that 2%. It's 98% accurate.
Yeah,
so
let me know.
For me, yeah, I know, right? I'm like, there's always somebody out there. Nothing is like, 100%. So for me personally, I have done a lot of things over my very diverse career. I've been the theme has been like teaching, service, and leaving someplace better than I found it. I mean, I don't know how else to put it. I really want to help people work better together. Everybody is included. I mean, to the degree that you can. I want that. That's really what I'm drawn to. And I thought that I was unemployable because within each job I've had, there's been a big piece missing for me. My entrepreneurial spirit is very rarely embraced by a company. And I thought, I guess it just must be because people like me don't work for companies. Then I did my behavioral assessment. It turns out I'm a profile called a maverick. And mavericks can do amazing things within a company that has the bandwidth, the structure for entrepreneurialism and innovation within their organization. It's just usually that's a tech thing. And I'm not necessarily a tech person. I'm a people innovator, process systems mastery. That's my thing. So once I saw that, it was like my whole life made sense. Like, oh, I'm not unemployable. I'm just a maverick. I've just been taking the wrong roles. Holy cow. So it gave me this incredible, it was like an epiphany, almost like an emotional and spiritual epiphany that I got from AI, essentially. Like, holy cow. So my experience with it has been, for example, I love working with startups because startups never know when to introduce culture. And the answer is immediately, because their culture gets built by default, and then it bites them in the butt, and then it's costing them money, and then they have to go back and do it. So working with a culture person at the very beginning, it costs much less and establishes your culture. And then you just continue to maintain it. You just keep trimming that rose bush, right? So the cool thing about PI is I was working with this startup, and the thing about startups is once they get that Series A money, Series B money, they're like double, like from 20 people to 50 people, from 50 people to 120 people. And to be able to scale that fast, you really need a tool that can help you, can introduce data really statistically accurate data about your candidates. And as you like, to your point, knowing how to interview into the gaps is solid gold. And the thing I love about this platform is it doesn't make a decision for you. It helps you make an more accurate decision. You can have way more confidence in a decision that's data driven. It's that simple. It also has an inspire piece that helps you build teams to achieve objectives. It helps you design your team so that you make sure you balancers. So you're not all up in like innovation and agility like you and I are. Like, you're never going to get through a meeting if you've got 20 people who are all up in that quadrant. You're never going to get anything done because everybody's going to need to have their 20 seconds of, or 20 minutes of fame in that meeting. So the platform helps you design all of these things. And it starts from the very beginning when you hire people. And they even have a diagnose piece to it. That's absolutely amazing. So the gift that Predictive Index gave to me was the fact that I have had so many different jobs over the course of my career. And every time I was in a job, I always felt this need to innovate and to try to create harmony and to make it better than I found it. And in every opportunity that I worked in, that drive was really not met with open arms. We'll just say that. I think that's a fair statement. It was not well received. And my employers would be just like, just go do that thing. I'm like, yeah, but we could innovate this, optimize this thing. And they're just like, little girl, just go do your job. Just go sit backwards and grab the med kit. And that always frustrated me. And I found in every job I had, it was like, I'm an 8-cylinder engine and at least one cylinder wasn't able to fire. And I thought, I'm unemployable. There's not a single job that could contain all the things that I love to do, that I'm skilled at. And I thought that I guess I'm just going to be a consultant for the rest of my life, which isn't bad, but being a solopreneur has its drawbacks. I really miss team. I really miss progress. I miss impact. I miss start here, get there, measure, get results, that kind of thing. So when I took the Predictive Index, it turns out, am a profile called a maverick. And there's lots of mavericks in the world, and people who have the profile of maverick are independent thinkers. We tend to move very fast. We are very casual. We have the need to lead and to innovate. And we're very quick. We're very agile, quick innovators. And so we need people to balance us, but at the same time, that's exactly what I had felt I was driven to do. And it wasn't that I was unemployable. It was that I had not sought the correct role for me. And it was like, it was an emotional and spiritual awakening, an epiphany for me. It was like such relief to see my instincts, my drive. And that's what Predictive Index does. And I didn't understand that until after I started after I got certified in it. It measures what drives people so that you can predict how they're going to behave and what their needs are to thrive. That's all it does. I mean, how long did it take you to it's like 2 banks of adjectives. You just picking words, right?
Yeah, it was what, maybe 15 minutes, if that, 20 minutes max.
Oh, you must have taken a long time. Most people take about 6 minutes.
Oh, maybe. I'll be honest. I had no concept of time. Truthfully, I think it was quick. To me, that was quick. Like I wasn't. It was just like word choice, and you just went boom, boom, boom. So yeah, maybe it was like 10 minutes max. Yeah, I wasn't timing it, but it definitely was quick.
Okay, that's good because and here's the thing. It's a minimum of 6 adjectives. And I had a CEO who took it. And I think maybe she chose like 8 words. She was done in like 1 minute and 30 seconds and it absolutely nailed her. And I've had people take it over the course of 20 to 30 minutes while they're multitasking, nails them too. It's just amazing. So the piece about it that I love, and I am into holistic solutions, simple holistic solutions. It's not enough. That's why I have both culture and talent, because I don't just want to leave people hanging with, all right, you've got these great hires, but I want to help you keep them. So Predictive Index has a handful of solutions, one of which, of course, is hire. And then it has a diagnose, which I absolutely love. If you're having productivity issues within your teams, it has a product called Design as well. So it shows you how your teams are designed. And if you are hiring, they have a software program called Inspire. So there's Hire, Inspire, Design, and Diagnose. So this is a complete package about precision hiring and using data to drive those decisions, seeing where everybody fits in the work styles framework. So there's 4 quartiles, right? So you got all your profiles. You want to make sure you don't have everybody all huddled into one corner. That's not going to produce the outcomes that you want. So you hire actually to balance your teams. And if you are already established and you're finding productivity issues, that's when you hit diagnose. And then I bring the culture piece to it so that within the software framework, so it's basically consulting powered by software, within that software data, I want to help you bring your unique culture, your rich, unique company culture to all of that data, to all of those practices. Because as you said, the software will guide you, not tell you, it will guide you so that you have a framework. Here's the questions to ask. Here are the things to look out for. Here are the strengths you can expect. It gives you all of that nuanced, granular data. And then once you plug that into an operationalized culture strategy, you are off to the races, completely scalable. You don't have to rebuild it. You just need to gently touch it once in a while to make sure that everybody's on board and that you have cultural continuity across the full EX. And it's much simpler than it maybe sounds. I mean, change is never a simple affair because humans are complex, but oftentimes the solutions are very simple. It's just implementation that takes some time.
That's amazing. And I just love it. And so I'm excited for people to kind of hear about this. One question I have for you, or another question I have is really around, as companies now look to really modernize their culture. Look, we've talked a lot about how organizations really, it's different now. COVID has made things different. So you often discuss 5 domains that they should consider in an organization's cultural fitness, if you will. Could you describe what those 5 domains are?
Yeah. So the first one is psychological safety. It's the backbone of any other piece that people measure. So if you don't have psychological safety, you're not going to get engagement, then everything else falls apart. At least if you have psychological safety, which means people feel like it is safe to challenge the status quo, to give upstream feedback, to have conversations that are real and difficult, to withstand creative abrasion, which is necessary for innovation. These are psychologically safe spaces. Pixar is a perfect example of a psychologically safe space. Boy, they want it. They want everybody to bring their unique point of view. So psychological safety is one of them. The other one is engagement. How are people being, I should say, invited to the party? How is their culture add being leveraged, being integrated? How are they contributing their unique culture? And then we have career pathing. This is right up your alley. If we don't have transparency and bias mitigation in career pathing, we are off track. And these simple, again, like sometimes solutions are simple, it's the implementation that gets a little bottlenecked. But really taking a look at your career pathing and are you providing the opportunities from within for people who want to? Not everybody wants to promote up, but if you're having a DEIB issue, take a look at your career pathing, right? Well-being, measuring well-being. So I measure it different. Oh, I'm sorry, it's not well-being, it's work-life balance. Work-life balance. And that's looking at, again, this is another one that's up your alley. What kind of parenting leave do you have? And do you have equal leave for fathers? That is like a really awesome metric right there. So few companies are willing to offer fathers to leave. It's kind of like, I don't understand, right? So that's another really important place to measure how are people being taken care of. And it also speaks to the culture. And you can do you just like read the writing on the wall with that one. And the final domain, as I call them, is conflict resolution. Is conflict encouraged? How is it resolved? Are people going straight to HR? Are they given the skills to work it out amongst themselves? As I said, healthy friction or creative abrasion is absolutely necessary for a healthy organization, or organizationism, as I like to call it, for that healthy organization to have that. That's why we have different people. If it's kumbaya, that is false harmony, and that is going to bite you in the butt. So how we have healthy conflict is really, really important. How we're having those conversations, which leads back to psychological safety.
Very nice. Very nice. And now I wanted to also talk about your show, and you mentioned it earlier. You talked about Sea Change, right? So you host a podcast called Sea Change. And what's awesome is that, as I've learned, we actually met through like this like podcaster kind of matching, right? It's called like matchmaker.fm, which is not a dating site, but it's actual like for guests and podcasts and shows and all of that. And this podcast tribe is like much larger than I truthfully even imagined. And so it's awesome to get to speak with other folks in this space. And so you host a show called Sea Change, and would love for you to tell us more about it.
Well, thank you. Yeah, because if you're listening, Sea Change, the reason I chose Sea Change is because it can be three different things. And it's the letter C with a dash and then change, like C-suite, but Sea Change. The idea of this show, I believe that, okay, so when I talked about my coaching clients and going from the micro to the macro, Sea Change is the product of that philosophy in action. For example, when I'm helping leaders who really struggle with being vulnerable, it doesn't feel safe, and I want to help them get to their soul. I'm going to get a little bit spiritual here, whatever you want to put it. I want them to really connect with the part of them that is expansive and permanent, and it is not associated with their body. Like, I want them to feel their own spirit. And I think about people's spirit as like the hearth in their house, right? The hearth, that's the fire of their spirit that burns no matter what. And I don't care how we get there. The front door, a window, you got to slide down the chimney. We're coming up through the basement. We're going in through the onion cellar. I don't care how we get to the seat of the soul, as long as we get there. So Sea Change is a piece of that philosophy at scale, because I don't care how I get the information to white men who are in positions of leadership and influence, who are working in homogenized leadership groups. I don't care how it gets to them. I don't care what it takes for them to hear it. All I care about is that we get that information to them through somebody they can relate to. And there's a lot of white guys who don't want to hear from a woman, certainly not a woman my age. It's like, that's cool. Who do you need to hear it from? How about another rich white guy? How about an amazing tech founder, woman of color? How about a Black man who is a lawyer and specializes in EEOC? How about it? How about an interim CEO who's been working for 25 years and specializes in making culture better when they come in? Who do you need to hear from? I'll put them on my show. So that is the sort of micro to macro in action. It's really kind of, in some ways, it's a little bit of a, I don't like to use violent metaphors, like a little bit of a shotgun approach, because I'm basically taking all kinds of demographics who have incredible expertise and can break things down into practical tools and best practices. But at the same time, I'm just like, who do you need to hear it from? Who's going to resonate with you? Who will you feel, community with, that you can go, oh yeah, that's a great idea. I think I feel comfortable broaching this in my homogenized group because I've seen it work over there. And now I have the data I need in order to socialize it. That's my goal. And who cares how we get in?
No, that's amazing. And now, how do you think predictive index could really better support leaders who are on your show, right, in their quest to diversify your teams, or the people listening to your show in their quest to diversify their teams?
One of the things that is really revelatory, and you got it just from looking at your own behavioral assessment, when I show senior leaders their team and where they plot on their team, and then where the leader themselves plots, and looking at all of the different profiles and where the areas of strength and where the areas of potential challenge come from, it's funny. Like you said, like it's uncanny. It lightens the whole process up, and you realize, oh, this is about how people work. This is about work style, not about personality. The reason that I'm like this, I mean, I'm me, but it's all maverick. And when you're dealing with a captain and a maverick and someone who's in like results and discipline, and they're super hard drivers, and you see the dynamics of the team you've got, and you you are very clear on the strategic objectives that you want to accomplish, sometimes it really opens a very clear door to, we need this piece in this leadership team. And the way we're going to get it is through hire or going through the company and seeing who have we got that's ready to move up, that might need some mentoring, but they are right in the target. They're right in there. And it turns out that they are an underrepresented group. That is, and they will know, they can have great confidence that they are bringing in somebody who's different than them, but they can have confidence that they can actually do the role because of all of the data that they will have access to support the decision, and just look at, all right, well, where are they going to need some mentoring? Where are they going to need some support? Or do they need it at all? I had this conversation with an executive at Microsoft just yesterday. And he asked me, so let's say I'm a maverick and one of the guys on my team's a maverick, then what? We're both mavericks. And I was like, this is the best question ever. Here's the thing. Without the profile, without understanding your own work style, it's very easy and quite natural to start assigning personal value on other people's behavior, taking things personally, making personal judgments and this type of thing. Like, oh, that's how Brian, I get frustrated because Brian's doing that thing again that he always does, because Brian is some kind of way, right? The moment you get a behavioral profile, and there's only 17 of them, and they're very sticky. And by that, I mean, they have super logical titles. Like when you hear the word maverick, you kind of know what you're getting. When you hear adapter, you kind of know what you're getting. And they're very clear. It's not like Myers-Briggs, and I love Myers-Briggs. It has its place. But like, if you tell me that you're an INTJ, I don't know what to do with that. I don't know how to treat you so we can get our work done better. However, but if you tell me that you're a maverick and I know I'm a maverick, what the power of the profile is, it allows you to disassociate a little bit your work style from your personality. So you are your own version of a maverick. Once you see those two profiles, suddenly you're like, oh, it's not that Brian is some kind of way. It's Brian's style is maverick. Of course, he's going to ask me about that. Or of course, he's going to try to get it going faster. Of course, he's going to be casual with the rules, because that's how he's driven. All of a sudden, people stop taking work styles personally. And it is a game changer. It's a game changer at every level, particularly at the highest level where you have the most jeopardy, where there is the most risk, and a little bit of decision goes a long, long way. I always like to say an ounce of CEO commitment is worth a pound of HR policy. So the higher up you go, the more powerful this software and I would say the outcomes, the more powerful those outcomes are. Why not have the data, and why not make your life a lot easier?
No, that's amazing. That is amazing. So look, I would love, the other part of this show is we like to give some advice for others. And I know we've been, kind of sprinkling throughout our conversation today, which has been amazing, but would love for you to talk about this. So for people who are looking for an appropriate culture fit for themselves, how should they begin that search?
I'm saying, begin your culture fit search by recognizing that you are a culture ad. Step one, be able to recognize your unique personal culture. I actually have a process that I call the unique culture profile that I bring to decision-making teams and leadership teams to help people understand their personal culture. It's like a personal brand, but it's a little bit different. It's a little bit more inclusive, and it speaks to your past and how you became the person you are. So first, number one, identify your personal culture. Know what's important to you and know what you're bringing. Know what you're bringing to the organization. Then be clear on the kind of culture that the organization has. Do they have a culture that embraces people like you who can actually leverage all of the gifts and talent that you are bringing to bear in your role? If not, find one that does. And if you're not sure, just take any old job and you will be able to answer these questions in about 30 seconds. Because the wrong fit is sometimes the quickest way to figure out what you're all about. I know I've got 20 years of experience with this. So finding out, being clear about who you are, what you're bringing to the table, finding an organization that's like, oh, that thing that you have, we not only value it, we want to expand upon it. And we want to help you grow and help us grow with it.
And now, what type of impact are you hoping to have in this next phase of your professional career?
The impact that I feel called to is to influence as many people that are ripe and ready to make a shift into a more equitable organizational structure. So taking the hierarchy and flatten it a little bit and taking the huge boat and turning it into flotillas. I would like to be a part of increasing accessibility and equitable treatment for all people. I would like to be a part of helping white men feel more psychologically safe, because when they feel safe and they're happy and they're healthy, everybody benefits. It's like this. Whoever's in charge, whoever the socially dominant group is, I want to help them feel generous. I'm not sure what that looks like, Brian. I just know that if there's some sort of deficit there, if there's any way that I can make a positive impact with the people who have the power to lift the velvet rope without shame, blame, or judgment, I want to help do that. I want to impact that group, because that's a big stone that makes huge waves. It will just naturally occur. It's like the fruit on that tree. I don't have to try to grow the fruit. I just want to help that tree grow. That's the impact I want to make.
That's awesome. Well, Maura, I want to thank you for taking some time to speak with me today. I enjoyed our discussion on your show, but learning about you, your work. Obviously, I'm interested, and look, I'm nerding out on predictive index as well.
It's awesome.
It is. It really is. And we definitely would love to stay in touch, follow your work, all of those good things. But where can our listeners find you?
Find me on LinkedIn. I do a lot of posting, and I put my podcast episodes up on LinkedIn. They launch at 5 a.m. East Coast time every Thursday. And you will have the pleasure of hearing my amazing conversation with this man right here, Brian's input about equal opportunities and DEIB and all the things, like incredible, just from a professional point of view and from a lived experience point of view. Brian's got it covered. So you'll be able to catch my podcast there. And I also have, if you need some inspiration and you're feeling like you want to get into that spirit, on Instagram, my handle is @soulful-leader, and it's soulful, SOULFULEADER. There's only one L in there, which is why it's not Soulful Leader LLC, because it's a pain in the butt to talk and spell it all the time. So, but that's my Instagram handle. Come find me there, join me there. I pump out a ton of content that is just meant to uplift you and remind you that you are an extraordinary being, and to get up above all the BS. And my website, maurabarclay.com. My podcast is also up there. And I have all of my offerings there, so you can learn a little bit more about how I operate and if we would be a good fit.
Very nice. Well, look, that'll do it for today's episode. Again, I want to thank my guest, Maura Barclay, for joining us today. I'll be sure to share where you can find her in our show notes. And look, I hope you all have gotten something out of this. You learned a lot about predictive index. It's fascinating stuff. But look, I hope you all have a great week, and I'll see you all next time. Thank you again, Maura.
Thank you so much, Brian. A real pleasure. Appreciate you.
Right. Thanks again for listening to Why I Left. Be sure to join us next time for more stories from the Great Resignation. Visit us at www.whyileft.co. That's whyileft.co. And subscribe to the show on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.